Welcome to the Deep Dive Spirituality Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Brian Russell, and today it's my privilege to have back on the show my friend and fellow Centering Prayer author, Rich Lewis. You can find out more about Rich at silenceteaches.com. Rich is the author of Sitting with God, A Journey to Your True Self Through Centering Prayer. And in today's conversation, Rich and I are going to talk about our journey to actually writing our centering prayer books and lessons that we learned about the publishing industry, writing itself, as well as what it takes to market and promote a book. So if you're interested in getting into the weeds and under the hood a little bit about the process of writing, you're going to really enjoy this episode. And I also wanted to announce to those of you who are listening to this up until March 12th that Rich and I are going to collaborate on a project, and at noon Eastern on March 12th, we're going to host a centering prayer conversation, which will include some Q&A with between Rich and myself, some conversation and teaching about centering prayer, and we're all going to do a sit together. This will be a virtual event. It's absolutely free. So if you're interested and would like to attend, you can email me directly at deepdivespirituality@gmail.com, and I will add you to the list and send you the Zoom link. Again, that will be March 12th at noon with Rich Lewis and myself. Let's jump into the conversation between Rich and I on the process and journey of writing books on centering prayer. Welcome back to the show, Rich. It's great to see you again.
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and we've had you on talking about centering prayer, and we've had you on twice now. We've just had a great conversation that was out last month, and this time I wanted to speak with you about writing because to me you have a remarkable story because you work in financial services, and now you have this centering prayer book, and you have a website, and you're serving folks through that. So can you talk a little bit about your journey from, and like at what point in your life did you decide to write a book? What was the backdrop of being able to write Sitting with God?
Yeah, the backdrop was, so I had discovered centering prayer in 2013 in Amos Smith's book, Healing the Divide, Recovering Christianity's Mystic Roots. He talked about a practice he'd been doing for about 15 years. So that immediately intrigued me because I'd always been attracted to silence. I just didn't know what to do in the silence. So I began practicing centering prayer in late 2013, reached out to Amos, and we began a back and forth email dialogue. And then really to this day, we're friends. But he actually is the one that encouraged me to write the book. So it probably never would have happened if it wasn't for him asking me to do it. And I'm finding that in my life just in general, some of the things that I do are because someone asked me to do it or nudged me to do it. So at that time I didn't have my website, so he asked me to work with him on his website, and did I want to have a weekly meditation going off of his site as well. So mine went off on Mondays, his was I think Thursdays or Fridays at the time. So it was Amos basically saying, we've had some neat conversations. Centering prayer has been so healing and transforming to you, and you probably could share a perspective that's much, much different than mine. And I think you need to write a book. So he said, take a couple weeks and write single sentence statements of what centering prayer means to you. So I did that and shot him back an email. And then he said, terrific, there's your chapters, go write. Well, at that time, I thought he was crazy. I never written anything more than a couple pages or so in college or high school. I just never had the type of class where I had to write a very long paper. So I decided, okay, I'll pick one of the sentences and write a chapter and send it to him and just see what he thinks. And if his reaction is like, oh my God, this is terrible, then I'll know, okay, I'll just move on. But to my surprise, he said, this is neat, this is fresh, and you really need to do this. So then that's where I decided maybe I can do this. And he's written one book. He has a second book getting ready to be published at that time. So I asked my wife, what do you think of me writing a book? And she said, I think that's fine. I guess both of us, my wife and I, were always supportive in different things that we want to do. But I didn't want to take time away from the family. So I decided to write the book on Saturday mornings. So it was a discipline to get up. I actually would set the alarm at about 5:30 a.m. on a Saturday morning, which really was the last thing I wanted to do. I wanted to sleep after a long week, but I set the alarm and then I would put on my baseball cap, grab the laptop, go to the local Starbucks because they open at 6, and I wrote. And I wrote from about 6 to 9 or 6 to 10 on Saturdays. So most of the book got written on Saturday mornings at the local Starbucks. And I began enjoying that process actually. It became really a neat spiritual practice because two of the chapters involved a little bit of research, of listening to podcasts and reading some books, and then putting in the book what I wanted to people to hear. But the other chapters were really more of my journey and my thoughts. So that was the neat part. It was a neat spiritual practice every Saturday of just get it out on from my brain onto the laptop screen. So I can blame Amos for the book, but I'm glad he nudged me, and that was how I made the book happen. But it was a discipline. I mean, I really had to discipline myself to do it. And there were times where I wrote other times too, but most of it was on Saturday mornings. So when I think about my next book, my fear is, do I have the same discipline? Can I do this again? And I think I can. But that, to answer your question, that's how the book came about. Someone nudged me to write it.
I love that, and I like the idea. So, when I think of like for myself, I don't know if it's just the way my brain works. I like to write in small pieces. So like when I hear like 6 to 10, I'm just amazed that you could sit still that long and write for 4 hours. And again, obviously you probably had to break it up and you walked, pick a walk or whatever. But what did you have like a word count goal each Saturday? What did you do when you got stuck? Were you really able most of the time to, sit for, 3-4 hours and produce? Like what did that look like? What did that feel like? And, what maybe obstacles did you have to overcome to be able to literally go from not really writing much in your life to sitting for blocking out 4 hours a week and going after it?
So I didn't have a word count goal. So I just I would take a break. I might write, and if I naturally felt like I needed to take a break, I would just stand up, or I would get another cup of coffee.
Right.
And I might check my emails, which probably is a big no-no because you really want to avoid the internet if you're trying to write. But I guess for me, it wasn't that difficult. I mean, it was a 3 to 4 hour block, probably closer to 3 hours with some of the breaks, but it was. And I think I ended up, if I would look back, I probably wrote 2 or 3 pages. So that probably equated to, I'm going to guess, it probably was 1,500 to 2,000 words. It had to be, because every time I was done, I would have 2 or 3 type pages. But it did take a while, though. I would be like, that's all I wrote. But again, I guess it was a lot more than I realized. But I guess it was just a discipline, and it was kind of a neat spiritual practice. It wasn't like, oh my God, here I go again. It was just like, just trust the process, trust that what comes out is what needs to be said. Don't judge it. This isn't the editing time. The editing that was another process, but this was just get it out on paper, get it out on paper. Don't worry about it. Don't judge it. Don't critique it. Just get it out.
No, I think that's so good. I know the mistake a lot of folks make is I mean, it was so clear what you just said. And I think this is so helpful for anybody listening, is like, there's a huge difference between writing and editing. I mean, the editing is what is the polish. The editing is what makes a decent book a really good book. But the time of writing is cranking out stuff. You don't even, you'll catch spelling, but it's like, don't even worry about that. You can look it up later. Don't worry about citing sources necessarily. Give yourself a note that you can go back and do it, but just get the words out. And it sounds like, so how did you instinctively just kind of know that? Because I mean, or did you do some research on how to write a book? It just seems like you knew exactly what to do, and it was your very first book. So how did that all happen? Did you have some mentor?
I think I instinctively knew that. And then I think Amos kind of said that, just get it out on paper. And I did some reading as well. And then even what I've learned through the whole process, I think the guy's name was Tim Grail, talked about marketing your book. I think I like to go live on Facebook. I talked about the four hats of an author. If you're a writer, and so I talked a little about what does that mean, which is a little bit what we're talking about now. You're just writing and getting the words out. And then you're an editor, which is very different than writing. And I kind of hated the edit. After a while, I didn't want to see my manuscript anymore. I mean, I really enjoyed it and I liked it, but after a while I was like, I don't want to look at this anymore, because And then the third step is, you're kind of a business person where if you don't want to self-publish, you have to reach out to publishers and try to get it a publisher. So you're a business person. And then the last thing is you're a marketing person, which where you have to market your book, and you want to let people know it's coming. It's not write a book, publish it, and then tell people about it. You want to tell people about it, that it's coming. Like I told people I was writing it, so they knew years in advance it was coming, which maybe put a little bit of pressure on myself to think, well, I'm keep telling them it's coming. Now I better get this thing out. But so an author wears four hats, or can wear four hats of writing, editing, business person, and then you're a marketing person.
That's so good. I mean, I think that's so helpful, because a lot of folks forget you have those other things. You have a kind of a whatever, I don't know if there's such thing as a glamorous thought of what an author does, but you just named the one thing that people think the author does is the writing, but it's the editing. And I love even if you love your book, you do sort of get sick of reading it after a while. But and that's, to me, that's the lesson that I've learned over the years. Like, frankly, a lot of academic books are completely unreadable because they're not actually edited. I mean, that's and it's so, you can love your words so much that you write these monster sentences and there's probably really interesting things in there, but the editing, to me, like what helped me to make a shift to loving editing is I just want to love the people that might take the time to read my book enough that I actually present it in a way that they can actually read it. And it's not, and sometimes you're cutting sentences down, you're catching stuff. I mean, you have to get people to help you with typos, because that's not always easy to find your own, but the shaping of the book itself, once you think you're done, is the key part of the book. And, and it's, and that can be the hard part, right? Do you have any horror stories? Like did you have to cut anything that you loved out of your book, or did you like make a shift on something that was kind of hard to let go that ultimately made it better? I mean, you may not have had that, but sometimes that seems to happen to folks.
Or I'm going to say one thing, and then I'll jump into that. In the editing mode, and you kind of do a little bit of this while you're writing, you want to make, and you did the same. I read your book twice, and it was easy to read. You want to make your book easy to read and a pleasure to read. So my book, the chapters were short. Your chapters were short. I used headings so people would know what to expect that they were going to read. I think you used headings as well.
Yeah,
and then
headings in there.
And then it wasn't long. It wasn't like 10 pages of reading until the next heading. It was a page or two until the next heading. So people could read in chunks, because I read in chunks, but I'm not saying everybody does. So the chapters were short. There was headlines. Let people read in chunks. And then I had questions for reflection and discussion at the end of each chapter. So many people said they really enjoyed my book because it was easy to read. They knew what to expect. The questions were helpful before they moved on to the next section. So you want to make your book, even after you've dumped it down on paper, so to speak, you want to make it easy to read and easy to enjoy, not a drudgery to read. Like I've seen some books, and I'm not judging people, but where you have the chapter and then there's no headings and it's one long chapter, and it's like, oh my God, this is going to stop. Like, that just surprises me. I think you need to break it up. I mean, and the book could be very good to read, but it's just one huge chapter. And instead of like, well, what am I expecting in this chapter?
No,
that makes sense.
It does make sense. And the way I'd like to talk about it is your book has to breathe. And just like we breathe in and breathe out, and punctuation are like places to take a breath. So if your sentences are too long, it's like you just suck in air. You'll have a chance to take a pause. And then, like you just said, the way you lay your chapters are like maybe bigger breaths. So you just think of your book as a rhythm, and you're letting people take in pieces of it, and whether it's, so I think it was beautiful the way that you described it. One of the things that I've loved about getting to know you, and again, I was thinking about, I started my podcast, and I think you were on about somewhere in the first year I still had it going on there. And I know I saw your name because I was searching centering prayer stuff on podcast, and you popped up on a podcast, and I'm like, oh, you got a book. And I thought, well, I'm going to invite Rich on to my podcast. And what was funny is I had a person said to me, like, you having somebody else promote somebody else's book on centering prayer. Don't you have a book? Aren't you just letting you're selling stuff for your competitors? And I was thinking, like, no, this isn't a competition. The world's really big. we're in the same space. And Lord, if somebody likes Rich's book, they might like my book. And if somebody likes my book, they might like Rich's book, or they like Cynthia Bourgeau's books or Thomas Keating's book. But, since I invited you on, I mean, I have to say, you've been incredibly kind to me. You've reviewed the book, my book, you've put links up sometimes, and, you've been on, again, you come back on the show now. So, so what helped you to cultivate what I would call an abundance mindset that, the world's really big. We need to get these messages out, and multiple people can be sort of working on tandem, and we're not competing over against a scarcity mindset where you're just holding on to your own stuff and not really helping other people. So where does that come from in your life, would you say?
I mean, I would say just in general, as I think about the book, I mean, my book, it wasn't just me. I needed people to help me get the book published. Amos nudged me to write the book. Amos did a lot of editing where we went back and forth with editing. Different other people helped me market the book. The people, all the different podcasts I've been on took me on, all the different places that wanted me to guest speak. So you don't publish a book in a silo. You have the editor and the publisher, and then the people that have helped you market it, and the people that interview you on podcasts, and the people that have helped you edit it. And then even my friends and family that I just gave the book just to glance at before I was doing anything with it, to say, read it or glance at it. What's your initial reaction? Is there something missing? So I think you can try to do things alone, but you're better off getting the help of others. So I think I got a lot of help from others, and I also like to turn around and help other people how I can, because I've gotten a lot of help. I feel I should be giving a lot of help to people. And then secondly, there's millions of people that we can help. So your book they might read my book and not like it, and they may read your book and love it because they read something in it and they connected more to it. So I think there's millions of people that we can both help. I mean, what does the U.S. have? 300 million people in it. Obviously, some of them are children, but even if we cut it down to 100 million people, our audience in just the U.S. is 100 million, and that's not even going internationally. So you're not a competitor. We have billion people that can read our book. So I'm not feeling that I'm competing with you by any means at all. And the neat thing about my book, when it was out in August of 2020. So I get paid once a year, and every publisher is different with the frequency. But when they gave me the statistics of the sales, half my sales were out of the U.S. So it was in Japan, Australia, Canada, Germany, Brazil. So it was neat. But the neat thing was that 50% of my sales were not even in the U.S. So the market for your book is huge. So I don't view helping you or anyone else as a threat. There's just too many people that can read the book.
I love that. I mean, I just love that. So I just like to lift that out, because not everybody. I mean, I think the key message is the world's about, especially, I mean, I think it's Christians, but this isn't even necessarily a Christian value, but it should be. It's collaboration, and right. We're always bigger when we work with each other. And I think that's, and I'm like I've told you before, I'm just super grateful for you, because I think you have skin in the game. You actually, to say the stuff, you actually do it. And I think that's really cool. And that's, so encourage folks, find, kind of team. It's not like Rich and I are on a team, but we're going to try to do some things together. And we're even this podcast. This is a collaborative effort. It's like, I think that's the way that that's what the church should be ultimately, is people pointing towards the same direction, and we each have our own gifts, and that's so biblical too. So again, I love the way you answered. So thank you.
And we've talked. Do you mind if I quickly come back to you in your one question of something that I talked about the editing I talked about kind of the book process, but one thing that I learned that I won't repeat again is the EndNote process. So as you write, because it took me hours of so if I'm writing something and I do a quote, immediately do the EndNote and capture that. Whereas I wasn't doing that. And then I had to go back and put in many EndNotes, and then I couldn't find the sources. I couldn't find the books. And it took me hours and hours of, Googling it and different things. And then in some cases, the editor said, well, we can't even find it. We're going to use a different quote. So maybe I would tell people, as you're writing, and if you're, quoting somebody or you're just referencing someone, do the EndNote there and then. As you type, you can do the EndNote, and then you can kind of follow the process for how you want to point it to somebody as a source. That was hours of work that that I will never repeat again. So that was the biggest blunder mistake I made, was the EndNote process.
No, that's really good, because I'm glad you caught that, because I think I actually said don't worry about the notes, but I think it's important what you just clarified, because I mean, I've done the same thing with Lord have mercy, my dissertation. I remember I think I spent 2 or 3 days going through the gazillion footnotes, because I just for little things. So yeah, so I think the key thing is in the writing, you want to capture the writing and not worry about the editing. But I think it is true on the footnotes, even if you need to clean them up a little bit at the end, make sure you mark the source and the page number, even if you don't polish the thing in the exact format, but you got to get the key things in. And if you actually can intuitively know what it looks like, I mean, I think that's exactly right. So that's a really good catch. Yeah, that'll save you a lot of frustration at the end for sure. Because I know for me, I had a couple of quotes, and publishers are different. Some publishers, like, you'll read a book and there's quotes and they don't even cite them. I know my publisher, if I couldn't find the exact source, I had to cut it. So I actually lost some of my quotes that I wanted to use, and I had to go looking for, like, literally one of the last things I did with my book is I had to go back looking for some quotes, because I lost some of my quotes because I couldn't find the source. And so, that might be a lesson for everybody too. Make sure if you're working with a publisher, you know exactly what they're going to expect in game, so you don't, lose pieces or, spend tons of time being frustrated about what you're working on. So yeah, that's good. Thank you, Rich.
And some of them, I think if you quote extensively, like some might say, if you go over 100 words, then we need to get permission. So I was careful just to be safe. I ended up looking at all my quotes and not going over 100 for anybody. And then I guess that was one publisher that I was started working with, and then it didn't pan out. But then they were concerned about how many words am I attributing to one person, and now we need to get their permission. So I had to start cutting. So that kind of stuff, EndNotes. And then if you do too many EndNotes from the same person, you might need their permission, depending. So you may or may not use all your quotes.
Yeah, so that's one of the things if you get a contract with a traditional publisher, make sure you read really carefully that permission stuff, because that's another one of those little sneaky things that, and like as Rich was just saying, everything he just said, if you end up using something too much, you actually have to write and get permission, and that's going to slow down the production of your book. So make sure you read your contract super carefully about stuff like that. And if you don't understand something, ask in advance, so you don't end up thinking you're done and when you find out that you're not. Talk a little bit about marketing, and like one of the things I think it's really cool. Again, first book, you're not a professor, so you didn't necessarily have a obvious platform to start with, but you got a contract because you got a good book, and obviously you had a good mentor in Amos Smith. But what have you learned about sort of building from scratch? Maybe you didn't build from scratch, but what did you learn about building a platform to support a book? What have you learned about marketing that you give as advice to maybe first-time writers, or even writers that haven't sold previously because they didn't know they needed to market?
Sure. I knew it was important. So I spent a lot of time, this is well even before the book, I guess I knew it was going to be published, but it was many, many months down the road. I began listening to podcasts. Jeff Goins was very good at. I listened to many podcasts of Jeff Goins where he just talked about marketing your book, and then I stumbled across Tim Grail wrote a book, I think it's called Your First 1,000 Copies. I read that, so I began reading and listening to podcasts to learn. Well, how do you market your book? So that taught me a lot. So I guess the biggest piece of advice I would give people is let them know it's coming. So if you have a book, even if you don't even have a publisher yet, and you have a website or you have a social media presence, let people know what you're doing. I have a book. This is what the basics are going to be about of the book, and let people know it's coming. And then, when I got a contract, I let people know I have a contract, and the book is tentatively scheduled for this date. And then if I had a potential title or a potential picture of the book, I would put that on social media. So I would say, let people know it's coming, because you can build buzz and excitement for it, so that when it actually is published and released, people know, and you have a lot of people ready to buy it, rather than you're now saying my book's published and everybody's like, oh, I didn't even know you were writing one. Right. So I would tell people it's coming and create buzz and excitement whether you do that through your email list or you do it on social media, or I would do a combination of lives. Some people like to watch you rather than read it. So I would do a Facebook Live and talk about my books coming, and I would do a Facebook post as well, or Instagram, whatever you use. So let people know it's coming is the definite thing you want to do. So you got to market your book before it comes out, not right after it comes, both. But you want to do pre-launch and then definitely post-launch type of stuff. So I put together a big plan where I wanted to make sure I got on podcasts as the book came out. So when I knew when the book was coming out, I began reaching out to podcasts so that when the book was out, I was on 10 or 15 at least podcasts the first week of the book. So that was some of the things I did, is let people know it was coming, Facebook Lives, Facebook posts, my email subscribers, share my journey with people, whether it's in posts or lives, and just talk to them about my writing process, talk to them about my editing process, talk to them about how I was planning on marketing it, get on podcasts, guest speak, get invited to church groups or centering prayer groups. And then the publisher, and I don't know if your publisher did the same thing. Like when the book came out, they offered free versions of the book for people in exchange for an Amazon review. So, and that was a whole lot of fun because that created buzz, where I said, the first 20 people that respond will get a free Kindle. In exchange, we'd appreciate a review down the road. And that was like, that happened rapidly. And then I just went back to the publisher and said, I got 20. Do you want another 20? Sure. And I did 40, like all in one day. It was easy. But it creates buzz and excitement. So you can do that depending upon your publisher. You can do that. I don't know if your publisher offered that or not.
Yeah, I put together a launch team, and and you'll see if folks look at social media, a lot of authors, you can see they'll put things up for launch teams. That's what Rich is really talking about. And that's, it's kind of funny. It's like, it's not really a game, but it kind of is at the same time, right? Because these are all authentic reviews, because you're not telling people what to write.
Right.
And you're offering a book, but in a sense, in the world that we live in, and this, you have to actually sort of get over the fact that you have to promote yourself. Like, this is my mindset. And I tell folks this, and I think I heard this from somebody on a podcast, but like the person said, if you had the cure for cancer, you would scream it from the rooftop, right? Now, and I thought, okay, I got that's. And the point is, if you put your soul into a book and you have something that's really valuable, you're simply letting other people know about it. But you have to get over the fact that, that you're marketing. So, like, what helped you? Is it your experience being like working in private, like in your industry, that you had no, like, how did you get over, or maybe you never even struggled with the idea that you have to market? Or was that a natural thing for you? Did you have to adopt a mindset? 'Cause for me, I've always felt like, oh, people are going to think I'm just marketing stuff. So, but I'm just like, I'm okay. No, I'm helping people. I'm serving people, and I need to let them know what I have, good or bad. Like, what is the mindset you bring to your marketing that or maybe you never had any blocks on it?
Some of it might have been just my day job. I interact with people, whether it's on the phone or on Teams or on Zoom. So I was comfortable doing that. So that wasn't hard. And then a couple of years back, when I first started my website, I just threw on a coaching page. Didn't know what I was doing, but figured I'll just put on that I coach. And lo and behold, someone reached out to me. But I didn't know at the time. I didn't know what I was doing, because then I had to reach out to another coach to say, now what do I do? Someone wants me to contact them regarding coaching. But so I ended up getting a coach that taught me, I'll say the proper way to get clients and enroll clients, where you're helping and serving people. So I was part of, a gentleman's name is Bradley Grinnan, did a tremendous job. And through him and his we had weekly meetings, and through just non-weekly interactions, I learned how to post on Facebook and help people. I learned how to do Facebook Lives. So it made me very comfortable with all of that. So I would say that just that experience of my regular job, and then the fact that when I was getting some help from another coach and learning how to post and how to do Facebook Lives and not be afraid to do it, because initially I was terrified to post on Facebook and share my thoughts, and I was terrified to go live and do something. Well, now I'm not, because I've gone live hundreds and hundreds of times, and I've done I think I've done about 65 or 70 podcasts, and I've done a lot of guest speaking. So you just have to do it and you become more and more comfortable. So I wasn't comfortable initially. Now I am.
Yeah, and just to break what you just said down, I mean, it's really interesting. Everybody just heard Rich talk about that. So he had some confidence already because he was used to interacting with people. And some folks may just need to start there, but because Rich kind of knew how to do that, notice he then stretched himself. He made a commitment to do this, and then he did it, even though it felt slightly uncomfortable for a while. So basically, what you had to do is you have to be courageous at that point.
Right.
And then lo and behold, he gets the new skill, and now he's even more confident now to go and do this next thing. Like, you've talked about, you have the centering prayer workshop, and again, that may have already passed, but you can go back and listen to our other episode by the time this comes out. But it's just interesting how life goes. You start with some confidence in what you've already done, commit to something bigger, be courageous, take action, then you get new capabilities and confidence. And I just heard you saying that almost perfectly. And it seems like that's the growth spiral that we can be on as authors. Can you talk a little bit about, and maybe this isn't true, so like you have an email list now, you have a website. So how did you go from, at some point you were at zero, you have a large social media following, like, did you have a strategy? What did you find most helpful? Because I'm imagining we're listening to some folks, maybe even pastors that want to write a book, but obviously they have their church. I mean, so they have maybe 100 people or whatever, but if you're going to sell something, you got to reach out. So what did you learn or advice you would give to somebody that's essentially starting at a zero platform to kind of build up, or a very small platform trying to build up to the size where you could, maybe sell 1,000 books or 2,000 books?
Yeah, for my website to attract subscribers, a lead magnet. So it's the free. When you subscribe, you get my free centering prayer ebook. So it took me about a week to do, even though it's I don't know, 12 pages. It's a PDF, and the pages aren't, as I said, there's single sentence statements and then kind of a space and another sentence. So you can read the book. So I guess a lead magnet where, when people come to my site, when they subscribe, they'll get a free centering prayer ebook. But then, so as soon as I had that lead magnet, I began marketing it. So I would put it on Twitter and say it in different ways. Visit me at Silence Teaches to learn more about centering prayer, or I'd say some type of quote and then link to my site and tell them to come to my site for the free ebook. So I guess the easiest way to grab or to get subscribers is to offer something free that's going to help and teach people something. So some type of lead magnet that helps people. So for me, obviously, centering prayer is what the site is all about. So it was a free ebook to teach people what is it and answer like 10 key questions on centering prayer.
Yeah. So the key thing is it's service. And I think that's the key thing with marketing. If you have something that's profoundly beneficial and actually enhances a person's life, and you're not stealing, you're not giving the scammy thing. We've all bought stuff that was just pure junk, but if you actually have something of value, you just, that's what marketing really is. And like, you're even giving real value. So your 12-page PDF may not be the final answer, but it's if somebody wants to get started, you're giving them a real value, and all you're asking in exchange is an email address. Right. And that's as simple as that. And obviously, if anybody that is online, you get people have these elaborate machines that just pump out gazillions of emails, but that's not what you're doing. You're just giving value, and then you keep people updated on what you're doing. I was also going to mention, before I forget, on the podcasting, if anybody's interested, Rich has been one of the top podcast guests. And I know that you introduced me to this also. It's funny, I heard it from two people almost the same week. You were one of them, and then another person, but it's podmatch.com. Right. And that helped me tremendously in the marketing my own book and getting the word out, and even getting experience being on podcasts. And I know that you've done that really well. So just folks, if you're an author, you're trying to get a bigger platform, podmatch.com, it works great. And they've enhanced it massively just over this last year. They're always making upgrades, and it's a very effective way to connect your expertise or what you're passionate about with shows that actually share those in different ways. And you still are using Podmatch, right, Rich? And you're on podcasts continuously.
Yeah, I every day I go into Podmatch and will message one or two or three people to try to get on future podcast. So it's a great site for hosts to be on, to get guests, and for guests to go on and find a podcast to be on. And in many cases, hosts are guests, so they're getting guests, and they're also becoming guests as well. It's a tremendous site, and all the people I've been interacted with and been on their podcasts have been fantastic. So it's well done. It's a super site, and it's been a gold mine for me. And I forget the name of the gentleman that pointed me to it in early May of this year. But they have a dashboard. So when I look at the dashboard, I looked at it this morning. It said I had 53 completed interviews since May, and it's actually more than that, because some people don't use all of the process, so they don't say it's done and recorded. So it's that depth where it says you've recorded it and it's marked as completed, and some people don't push it through the entire process. So I've probably done at least 60 or so since May of this year. So I probably do anywhere from 1 to 3 a week.
Yes. Oh, it's fun though. It is good. It's one of those reminders that back, we had that conversation about abundance and scarcity. There's just incredibly generous, interesting, kind people. And I've met some remarkable people from Podmatch, and it's been a true blessing, and it's fun. Let me ask you a final question. I mean, I think this has been super helpful, and this is going to help anybody that's interested in publishing, because it's been a real realistic behind the curtain type of a thing. So, on the previous podcast, had you on, you're thinking about writing another book starting, let me see, what was it, June of 2022? You had like a date or something, right?
Where I want to start writing.
Yeah, when
discipline myself.
No, and you're going to give it a shot. Do you already know the topic? I mean, do you have a sense of where you're heading with that yet? Or are you literally just going to sit down and figure out what book you want to write? Like, what book do you think you have in you right now?
It's funny. You say I have two thoughts, but and it's funny. I have I have one thought of that. I want to go more into your true self and who that is and how you can become that person. I mean, obviously my first book, Sitting with God, A Journey to Your True Self Through Centering Prayer. But as you look at the different chapters, it's not all on your true self. So a book may be more honing in on that, because I think when you live from your true self, it's really true freedom. And it's a wonderful thing to be living from your true self. So that's one thing I could definitely write in a book. But then it was funny, on Thanksgiving, my wife's mother was talking with me, and she's like, "What's your next book going to be?" And I said that, and she goes, "Why do you want to do another centering prayer book? You might want to do just something a little bit different and show them another side of you." So it made me think, so I don't know what that other side of me would be. Like, it would probably be in the contemplative space and in the similar space, but maybe a different slant on it. So maybe it would be something where I would surprise people by, "Oh, I didn't expect that from Rich. This looks like it might be interesting. I want to read it." So I'm not sure, actually. So it's maybe true self and a deeper dive into your true self and how you can connect to it, or maybe something slightly different, but still in the contemplative space that would be, important for our times for people to read.
No, it's funny, because it is always interesting when you try to think about what to write about. I think I know what my next book is. I have the metaphor. I'm not really quite ready to set it on here, because I thought it was going to be about Lazarus, but now I have this tree that I'll have some posts about the tree. People will see this, but I think I have the metaphor for essentially how do you come back to life after you've died. And what I mean, that death can be in all kinds of, it's not literal, obviously, it's the different metaphors, and how do you deal with, again, fear, guilt, shame. But the question I like to ask myself, and it's again, I'm not even gonna, you don't have to answer this right now, but I think the interesting book, I mean, because it's the challenge, right? It's be easy to do another centering prayer book, just like if you're like a musician, you have a hit, give us another one of those, and you just keep doing the same thing, which can be fun until at some point you're like, well, I need to totally switch it up. Like, I always like U2. They've all their music, they kind of grew as a band, though they're still U2. Or so I think one of the questions that's fun to ask as an author is, what's the book I'm afraid to write? And then why would I be afraid to write it? So and this may encourage somebody listening, and may even encourage you. Like, when I wrote the Centering Prayer book, I was actually afraid to write it. Only in this sense, I wasn't afraid to write it. I was afraid to send it out, because I put so much of myself in the book, and I had originally I was just basically trying to figure out what had happened to me. And even up to the day, I'm like, I don't know if people are going to like this. I don't know if I'm going to lose folks, because I'm going to be revealing about something of my own struggles in the book. But So I think that's an interesting question. What's the book you're afraid to write? And then, play around with why you might be afraid. And then maybe there's there, and maybe if nothing, that's a great way to talk about it in your head, and it may give you an idea. And it may not be for you, Rich. I was just talking out loud and for other folks, but I think that's a fun thing. But well, any closing words on writing? We'll kind of wrap this up here. Again, we'll put your show notes on your book, Sitting with God. I know your website, silenceteaches.com. Put folks there. Any final words that you'd want to share today? Something that maybe we didn't cover?
Yeah, I would say, I think everybody has a book in them. It's just a matter
Yeah.
of disciplining yourself to do it. So I would encourage people to write a book, but it is a discipline, like centering prayer, is a daily discipline or practice. I would encourage people to write a book, whether it's small, medium, or long, but discipline yourself to write a book and share with the world what if when you don't do that, people don't get an opportunity to learn something from you or learn something they may never have learned before. So I would encourage people to try to discipline yourself to write a book. If it's 10 pages or 50 pages or 100 or 300, just do it. Discipline yourself. And whether you take the publishing route or whether you self-publish it, just do it, because I think you'll be thrilled you did it.
Oh, that's so good. That's really good. And so I love that. Again, thank you so much for being my guest today. It's been a real joy and a privilege to have you back on, Rich.
Great. Thanks for having me on this writing topic. It was neat to hear your kind of experiences and how you go about the process.
Well, thank you. And everyone, thanks for listening all the way to the end to this episode of the Deep Dive Spirituality Conversations podcast. Until next time, live by faith, be known by love, and be a voice of hope in the world. Amen.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Deep Dive Spirituality Conversations podcast. All resources that were mentioned are in the show notes. Again, let me remind you of my book, Centering Prayer, Sitting Quietly in God's Presence Can Change Your Life. It's available now on Amazon. And also, if you're interested in attending the virtual Centering Prayer event that Rich, Lewis, and myself are going to co-host, it will be on Saturday, March 12th at noon Eastern. Email me at deepdivespirituality@gmail.com, and I will add you to the list and get the Zoom link out to you. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.